dawn. I'm Andrew, a retired police officer turned lumberjack, living in the isolation of my cabin deep within the forest. On a crisp, cloudy morning, the sound of my axe hitting the wood echoed through the otherwise silent wilderness. I had just finished chopping some firewood when a low hum from the sky caught my attention. Looking up, I noticed a cargo plane flying unnaturally low. It had a sinister jet-black exterior. As I squinted at the peculiar sight, I heard a loud thud from inside the forest. Curiosity pulling me away from my woodpile, I ventured into the woods. I kept my revolver holstered at my side, a comforting presence amidst the uncertainty. The scent of damp soil and pine filled my nostrils as I went deeper into the forest. My heart pounded in my chest, and the forest's usual serenity seemed ominously eerie. A broken tree branch snapped under my boot, the sound slicing the silence and echoing around the moss-laden trees. Nearing the location of the sound, I came across a peculiar sight. A large metallic box, almost as big as a small car, was nestled between some ferns. Its polished steel surface was out of place amidst the rugged terrain of the forest. Its exterior was unmarked except for a biohazard symbol on one side, an image that sent chills down my spine. I raced back to my cabin, my heart pounded in my chest like a war drum. The fresh air of the forest was now laced with an unnatural metallic scent, a pungent reminder of the terror unfolding. With every breath, I felt the taste of fear and dread in my mouth. Bursting into the cabin, I slammed the door shut and frantically scanned the room for something, anything, to shield myself from the approaching peril. My gaze landed on a dusty gas mask I kept from my police days. Grabbing it, I placed it over my face, its familiar weight an odd comfort in the chaos. I moved towards the window, peering out at the ominous purple mist descending from the skies. It was slowly carpeting the once lush forest with a toxic veil. The sirens in the distance had grown louder, joined by the screams of woodland animals, a symphony of terror that echoed through the forest. The once bustling town nearby, usually a beacon of light and life, was now eerily silent under the toxic purple haze. I could only imagine the panic that had ensued. The town was small and isolated, mostly populated by loggers and their families. They wouldn't be prepared for something like this. I jumped as a series of loud, abrupt thuds echoed from outside my cabin. Someone was pounding on my door. Heart pounding, I gripped my revolver tighter, my finger hovering over the trigger. "Help, please," a voice rasped from outside. The voice was familiar. It was Bill, a fellow logger who lived a few miles away. I had known him for years, a gruff man with a heart of gold. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door. Bill stumbled in, his face pale and speckled with the same blistering sores I had seen on the man in the forest. He was gasping for breath, clutching his chest. "I saw the plane, then the box," he gasped between labored breaths. "The mist, the animals, they started acting strange. Then the sores." Fear gripped me as I listened to Bill's broken words. Whatever had been in the cargo plane and the box had affected him too. It was spreading. We were isolated, disconnected from the world, and enveloped in a toxic haze that threatened our lives. As Bill's breaths grew more labored, I tried to provide comfort. I felt a crushing sense of helplessness as I held his hand, watching the life slowly drain from his eyes. Bill's death was a harsh reminder of the invisible enemy we were facing. Wrapping Bill's body in a blanket, I moved him to the corner of the room. I sat in silence, grappling with the surreal horror of the situation. The silence was broken by the distant roar of more jets. Looking out the window, I saw more planes descending, leaving trails of the same deadly mist. I knew I had to do something, to get the word out, to warn the outside world. I felt a sense of duty, a call to action amidst the chaos. I knew the old radio in the basement was my only hope. It was an antique, a remnant of the past, but it was operational. If I could manage to send out a distress signal, there might be a chance of rescue, or at least a warning to others. As the day turned into a nightmarish dusk, I found myself in the basement, tinkering with the radio. Every passing second felt like an eternity as I tried to establish a connection, my every breath a silent prayer for survival. Swallowing hard, I reached out to open the box, when suddenly a high-pitched, pained scream echoed through the trees, making the hair on my neck stand up. It sounded human, but twisted and distorted. The scream ended abruptly, replaced by a terrifying silence that lingered like a chilling mist. Instinctively, my hand reached for my revolver, my fingers wrapping around the cool grip. Cautiously, I moved toward the direction of the scream. The forest seemed denser, its shadows darker, the sounds magnified by the adrenaline rushing through my veins. The trees rustled, whispering in the wind as if sharing secrets. The forest was no longer my sanctuary, it was a witness to an unknown horror. 100 yards from the box, I found a man slumped against a tree. His clothes were torn, his skin blistered and bubbling, resembling the surface of boiling water. His eyes, wide with terror, stared blankly at me. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but all that came out was a low gurgle. His hand reached out towards me, a silent plea for help, before he went limp, his arm falling lifelessly to his side. Horror washed over me, freezing me in place. The sight was gruesome, a stark contrast against the natural beauty of the forest. I reached for my phone, intending to call for help, but there was no signal, a disadvantage of living in such isolation. Pulling myself together, I rushed back to the metallic box. I decided to open it, hoping for some explanation or at least a clue. A rush of cold, stale air hit me as I cracked open the lid. Inside was a collection of vials filled with an iridescent purple liquid. The sight of the liquid, coupled with the biohazard symbol and the man's condition, made a cold realization dawn on me. I was standing in the middle of a biological incident. Just as I was processing the situation, an unnerving sound broke through the silent forest, the distant wail of sirens. They seemed to be coming from the town nearby, followed by a muffled roar of jet engines overhead. I looked up to see military aircraft streaking across the sky, leaving behind trails of purple mist that matched the liquid in the vials. I instinctively covered my face, rushing to the safety of my cabin, praying that I could escape whatever horror was descending from the skies. The once comforting solitude of my forest had become a chilling nightmare. The Shadows of Acheron. The Shadows of Acheron. That's what I call my tale now. It serves as a constant reminder that the world is full of mysteries, some of them far darker than we can ever comprehend. And as I go about my life, I can't help but wonder, am I forever safe? Or will the shadows one day come for me again? I'm not sure how I found myself walking home at midnight through Acheron, the most ancient part of our city. But I did. The old buildings, all weathered stones and creeping vines, loomed over me like silent sentinels. A soft wind stirred, sending a shiver down my spine as I made my way through the dimly lit streets. The echo of my footsteps filled the quiet, turning my every move into a ghostly announcement. Without warning, a sudden noise jolted me out of my thoughts. It was a high-pitched shrieking sound, a cross between a scream and a metal gate creaking open. It came from a dark alleyway to my left, shattering the eerie calm. I paused, my heart pounding in my chest. A logical part of me argued that it was just some animal, but the primal fear that clenched my guts begged to differ. Then I heard it again. This time, it was accompanied by a soft, sickening crunch, like bones being crushed under a boot. The sound turned my blood cold. I knew then that I had to investigate. Leaving the main path, I crept towards the alley, the sound of my own heartbeat drowning out the far-off noises of the city. As I turned into the alley, my eyes adjusted to the darkness and fell upon a scene that I can still barely comprehend. A monstrous creature, all gnarled limbs and flickering shadow, hunched over a form on the ground. The figure was nearly indistinguishable, but as I squinted, I made out the clothes of our old janitor, Mr. Jacobs. Fear seized me, choking off any thought of screaming or running. I was frozen, trapped in the spectacle of the nightmare that was unfolding. The creature was like nothing I'd ever seen. It was like a shadow, a patch of darkness that was somehow darker than everything around it. Its long, bone-thin limbs ended in claws that clicked against the pavement. It turned, and its eyes, two burning coals in the inky blackness, found me. A low, rumbling growl echoed off the stone walls, causing me to tremble. Panic set in, and I stumbled back, breaking into a run. The creature let out another ear-splitting shriek and gave chase. Its pursuit was a cacophony of clicks and growls that bounced off the ancient buildings. With every turn and twist through the labyrinthine streets of Acheron, I could hear it closing in, the echo of its clawed feet growing louder. I felt my breath becoming ragged, my legs beginning to ache. As I rounded a corner, I tripped on a loose cobblestone and went sprawling onto the hard, cold ground. The contents of my bag scattered in the fall, an ink pen rolling away into the darkness. I scrambled to my feet, casting a desperate look behind me. The creature was almost upon me, a writhing mass of darkness that blocked out the faint light from the distant street lamps. The sight of it barreling towards me, eyes burning like hellfire, was the most terrifying thing I'd ever seen. My heart pounded in my chest like a drum, each beat a countdown to the inevitable. I was about to become prey to this nightmarish creature, just like poor Mr. Jacobs. Just as the creature was about to reach me, an unexpected salvation appeared. A single beam of light cut through the darkness, piercing the creature. It was the headlight of a motorcycle, revving loudly and careening towards us. The creature reared back, hissing as the light seemed to burn it. Its form flickered and shimmered, the darkness melting away like a fog under the sun. The motorcycle skidded to a stop, its tires squealing against the old cobblestones. The driver, a burly man in a leather jacket, jumped off the bike and swung a crowbar at the waning form of the creature. The creature recoiled and made a terrible guttural sound that rattled the windows around us. Its eyes still burned with a furious intensity, but the rest of it was flickering, wavering under the onslaught of light and force. With a final hiss, the creature turned and fled, disappearing into the shadows from which it came. The man turned towards me, the motorcycle's headlight illuminating his grizzled face. He grunted, nodded, then revved his motorcycle and disappeared down the road, leaving me alone in the eerie quiet of Acheron. I was left with a trembling body, a mind full of horrifying images, and the deathly silence of the ancient city. Once I regained my senses, I picked myself up and managed to stagger my way back home. My mind was a whirlwind of fear and confusion. Had that creature been real, or was it a hallucination born out of exhaustion? And who was that mysterious stranger? The following morning, I reported Mr. Jacobs's fate to the local authorities, omitting the part about the shadow creature for fear they would think I had lost my mind. They found no evidence of foul play, no creature, no corpse, not even a single drop of blood. It was as though Mr. Jacobs had vanished into thin air. The days that followed were filled with unease. Every shadow seemed to hide a lurking monster. Every night was a sleepless bout of terror. The terror of that night seeped into my days, tinging my every waking moment with a dull, persistent fear. The ancient city of Acheron, with its hauntingly beautiful architecture, was no longer a place of history and charm, but a terrifying labyrinth hiding unimaginable horrors. I don't know what that creature was or why it was in Acheron. I don't know who the stranger on the motorcycle was. I have no answers, only the lingering fear and the haunting memories of that horrifying encounter. The unseen shadow. Beneath the pitch-black mantle of night, I trudged wearily through my fields. My boots pressed down on the freshly tilled soil, and in my hands a hefty sack of seeds weighed down heavily, full to bursting. It was the crack of dawn, with the sun a mere whisper against the horizon, painting the world in shades of indigo and grey. The metallic tang of dew-laden air was punctuated by the low grumble of the tractor idling behind me. But then a sound cut through the morning serenity, a rustling in the distance, too hasty to be just another nocturnal creature in the undergrowth. My eyes darted towards the cornfield, the stalks gently waving in the faint breeze. Silence descended, wrapping the morning in an eerie stillness, only to be broken by another rushed movement. This time it was closer. Placing the sack gently on the ground, I ventured towards the disturbance. A low growl rumbled in the back of my throat as I picked up a sturdy shovel resting against the barn. I've heard tales from neighboring farms of wild animals getting bolder, but this felt different. There was an uneasy energy hanging in the air. Peering into the gloom, the first rays of the sun revealed a scene that froze the blood in my veins. An ungainly figure sprawled at the edge of the field, darkened by the morning shadows. A city dweller from the looks of his crumpled suit and tie, unaccustomed to the harsh realities of rural life. I approached cautiously, heart pounding like a drum in my chest. His skin was grotesquely discolored, bluish and speckled with an odd substance that glowed faintly in the dawn light. His eyes were open, glassy and vacant, reflecting the terror of his last moments. Feeling a chill crawl up my spine, I reached for my phone, thumb hovering over the sheriff's number. But the persistent quiet made me think twice. The morning chorus of birds, usually in full swing by now, was absent. The farm, the entire valley it seemed, was wrapped in an unnatural hush. Retracing my steps back to the farm, I felt a shiver pass through me. What had happened to the stranger, and why was there such an uncanny silence? I resolved to find answers. The stillness was unsettling, but the silence was horrifying. Shrugging off the initial shock, I got into my truck and decided to head towards the nearest town, Silver Creek. The sun was just peeking over the horizon, washing the world in its warm yet hauntingly diffused morning glow. The journey to town was usually a comforting ride, but the unsettling events of the morning lent an eerie tone to the landscape. Arriving in Silver Creek, the oddity of the situation escalated. The usual humdrum of the morning was missing. There were no kids rushing to the school, no morning joggers on the pavements, not even the old man Jenkins opening his newsstand. The town seemed abandoned, as if everyone had simply vanished. Moving further into the town, I noticed Mrs. Granger's bakery, the heart of Silver Creek. The door was ajar, and an unsettling silence hung heavily in the air. Taking a deep breath, I stepped inside. The familiar scent of fresh bread and pastries should have greeted me, but instead there was a strange, musty odor. That's when I saw her. Mrs. Granger, the ever-smiling, bustling woman, lay collapsed near the oven. The glow of the heated coals cast an eerie shadow over her body, highlighting the bluish tinge and sparkling specks on her skin, strikingly similar to the man in my field. I stepped back, a cold dread washing over me. I rushed out of the bakery, scanning the desolate streets. Panic seared through my veins. The realization was slow but terrifying. Whatever had happened to the stranger in my field and Mrs. Granger had swept over the entire town. Suddenly, a deafening siren cut through the stifling silence, originating from the town of Ashwood, further up north. My heart pounded against my chest as I raced back to my truck, the horrific discovery propelling me back towards my farm. As I sped out of the lifeless town, I glanced up to see the ominous silhouette of military jets streaking across the dawn sky, a trail of an odd greenish gas spewing from their tails. A strange sensation gripped me, and instinctively I pulled my collar up over my mouth and nose, praying to escape whatever malevolent force had descended upon us. Finally reaching my farm, I found myself alone and terrified, left to ponder the nightmare that had so abruptly shattered the calm of the morning. The disconcerting quiet of the valley seemed to echo my fear, the unheard screams of Silver Creek echoing in the chilling silence. I was in the middle of my own horror story, the ending of which was as shrouded in mystery as the eerie, unseen shadow that had befallen us.